Welcome to Embedded. This is Elecia White with Christopher White and Chris Gammell.
Hello. No, sorry, was I not supposed to kind of...
No, that's good.
We haven't done this very recently, so... Just pop out with hello. Hi, Embedded listeners. I'm Chris from the Amp Hour.
Amp Hour listeners.
Yeah.
Well, here we all are.
We're doing it.
Yeah.
Here we all are.
Okay, but this time we're going to talk about firmware, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the plan? You have been doing firmware. You're a hardware engineer. You know that, Chris, don't you?
I do. And you know what's really crazy is I've been kind of, the month of January has been me reviewing my yearly goals and just kind of like yearly goals or whatever they are. But one of the things that's on there is just like more firmware projects. And I've been consulting for about 18 months now, a little bit more. And the thing about that with hardware is it's really choppy, right? So unless you have like a client that just has lots and lots and lots of boards, it's really choppy. You do a board, you build it, you test it, assuming you build it. And then if you have a firmware person you're working with, it's just like you hand it off and there really aren't any changes unless you mess something up or, you have a revision. And then that's great for the client. That's like a best case scenario is you haven't messed it up and everything works as expected. But from a consulting standpoint, as you both know, it's choppy, and that means that income is also choppy. And I have to have a lot of clients, and lining it all up is kind of just logistically really tough. Not to mention, I want to get better and offer better services to clients. And so I was like, well, I should really be taking on more of the firmware aspects. So I've been doing that, and it's been great. This firmware stuff, it's got legs, I think.
Why'd you go for firmware instead of FPGA?
That's on the table too. I mean, it's just
you're gonna be a full stack product designer. I
think it's just more, doing more things and learning more things. Like I had this great revelation recently within the consulting world that I get to just I'm not learning from scratch and I'm not having a client pay me to learn, but there is so much to learn.
There is,
and I feel like in the consulting world versus my previous corporate gigs, it's really varied. I mean, both of you're doing machine learning and all of the various things that you're doing, and there's so much stuff out there.
Yeah, it's kind of like working at startups. I remember the difference between working at a startup and working at the big corporate gigs was always the big corporate gigs. You got to work on something, but it was a very small little corner, and maybe it was a small little corner of something that had been around for a while, and so there wasn't really that much to learn except good programming practices and all the high level stuff. But the first real startup I worked at, it was like, oh my God, we need a motor controller. Oh, okay, we need this sensor hooked up with SPI. Okay, we need this flash thing to work. And it was just one thing after another like that. And unless you get into the right startup that's doing something from scratch that has all these pieces, you're not going to get an opportunity to really learn all those pieces unless you kind of have little jobs all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from a business perspective, yeah.
There's less pigeonholing in startups. You have to do breadth, but you also have to do depth, which is what makes them so hard.
They always turn into, if they're successful, then they quite often turn into the big corporate things, and then you're responsible for 8 lines of code for the rest of your career there.
Optimize that, please. Yeah.
That's painful, though. Going from a startup where you're the 3rd or 4th engineer to supposedly, just being an engineer, and you're like, but I designed this system. What do you mean you want me to make another SPI driver? I already did that. So you're doing firmware, and you made a concentrated effort to learn, not just to modify what somebody else had done.
Yeah, so I've been hiring tutors, and I started with like a personal project, just kind of getting back into it. I've obviously bugged both of you, bugged other people on the embedded Slack, and have been just generally trying to put more focus on it because it's not something that just I could hop back into. And and so past projects, I've done firmware in the past. It's not like I've never done firmware before, but sometimes it's like, well, I'll just throw an Arduino IDE kind of at this problem or that problem, and it just doesn't work at that point. You don't get debugging, you don't get a lot of things.
What was your personal project?
It was a light up wristband. It's still in progress, actually. So what I was really doing is I went on LCSC And
What
I
is
found that
LCSC?
that's the so JLC is like a PCB manufacturer. You ever heard of them?
Let's go with no.
Okay, so like they're a very, very low cost PCB manufacturer, and they also have like a DigiKey equivalent. But the interesting thing is that they have a lot of parts that are Chinese only. Like they're only available in mainland China, but they'll actually export them. And so a lot of brands you wouldn't know, but a lot of like kind of weird data sheets and maybe not super well documented functions, but just they're cheap stuff. I mean, like really, really, it's stuff that goes into consumer goods. So for example, one of the chips that I was looking at, it's a 433 megahertz transceiver, not even transceiver, it's a transmitter. And so it's a really simple like I2C style interface, but it's called like just data stream or something very, very generic. And that's what goes into those really, really cheap quadcopters you can buy, like the toy ones.
Mm-hmm.
And not super well documented, but you can use that, and it's like 10 cents, 15 cents in quantity. Like not even high quantity, like that's like a 100 quantity. And so I did that, and then I also grabbed like STM32 stuff is really low cost on there too. And so I grabbed the lowest cost STM32 I could find, which was a F030, and that's like 30 cents in 100 quantity. Something just like really, really low prices for what I'm used to. And just wanted to see what I could do with it. And so the idea was making a remote Blinky thing that I could synchronize with lots of people. So that's the thought. That's what I've been working on. And we'll see how it goes.
Is this for conferences or for raves?
This is for an event that I'm throwing, next summer.
Ah.
So yeah, it's still in the works, but that was kind of my platform for like, oh well, now I can dig into STM32 and just ARM Cortex M0s. I'd used them before on, like I said, like using an Arduino IDE, everything's kind of abstracted away. It's not like I hadn't used similar kind of micros and stuff, but when you make that shift over, and I think we've talked about it before, it's a drastic shift. It really is to be deep in the register sets and dealing with data sheets directly and all the things that you talk about in an embedded FM.
Yeah. And the tools are far more brittle, and they've gotten better, but they've gotten better to the point of, well, it should have been this way like 15 years ago. So
right.
Got a long way to go. What parts are you finding the most frustrating?
Well, I swung a little bit too hard. I think I went to like, oh, well, I'm going to do everything with GDB, and I'm going to do everything in Vim and, do compilation. And it was a little overboard, to be honest. But the thinking there was I've used IDEs before, and I never really knew what all the stuff scrolling by was, like you see. And so I always talk about the 2 a.m. problem. Like what happens now where I'm on a job, working on something, there's a deadline, 8 a.m. the next morning, it's 2 a.m, and I just need to get something working. And there's just some weird compiler flag that I just don't understand because I've never used anything on the command line prior to that. And it felt like I really had to have that experience in order to dig myself out of my own holes,
Okay, so Vim, which I think when you told me that, I laughed initially. Because there's only one real thing I know about Vim, and it's escape :Q.
:WQ, yeah. You learn that one real fast, or else you Control Z and you back out the hard way.
The problem is I type so fast that every time I do that, about 70% of the time I do :W1 instead of Q. So almost every directory on my computer has a file called 1 in it. And I just come across them occasionally, delete them, and realize, oh yeah, that was when I was in VI.
It's like a trail it's like breadcrumbs,
Yeah. I should have a script that periodically goes through and deletes everything called 1.
Right. Yeah, that probably wouldn't have disastrous consequences.
I like the idea of the 2 a.m. problem, that you want to be able to solve just about everything yourself. But that's a hard.
Here's my problem with it.
thing.
Here's my problem with it. And I think it's laudable.
Is it 2 a.m.? Because you don't see that time of night.
That's goes without saying. But there's always going to be a 2 a.m. problem you don't remember having come across. Like there's so many things with, like you're saying, with C flags or configuration or linker maps or whatever, where there can be just a small error. It's always going to take you hours to figure it out. I see where you're going with that, and I just wonder if it's the right application of learning energy.
Well, I can say I can talk more about it later, but in the interim, I have swung back hard the other direction.
Okay.
And I think it's like, it's really good for level setting, right? It's like, oh, okay, this is the way it used to be. Yeah. This is the way it can be. And you can build up your own setup. And I will say that some of it is influenced by my tutors as well, right? So like they were doing that anyway. Well, one of the two was doing that anyways. And he's really helpful, but he's like, this is a great way to learn this. And I agree it was. I mean, and I knew I had, so it's not until the summer of this year. I knew I have time to do that kind of thing. And so I was like, okay, yeah, let's go for it. I think it is good to have that baseline of experience, but yeah, it's arguable if it's the best way in general. Like there's all these tools are built around other workflows, and it would be kind of audacious of me to think that I'm going to come up with a better thing. I'm going to customize I really need this because I'm so high performance. It's like that's not going to be the case.
I mean, there's certainly reasons to stay in the command line world, but and it's great to have seen all that stuff. And I think it is valuable to go through that and say, okay, this is how this works, just so you know what the things are if you do have to eventually look into it.
And there is no one right way.
Of course, right.
And if you can see as many different ways as possible, you can find a path that works best for you. And I don't use VI, but it's not like I don't respect people who do. I just don't know those things. And of all the things in the world to learn, that hasn't been high on my priority.
Right. And so I've always been, so I made like a conscious effort to do full Linux everything these days too. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the traditional tool makers, they just ignore it. They say, well, sorry,
yes,
switch to Windows. I mean, you've talked about it on your show too, of like, switch to Windows, that's what firmware is. You're in Windows. And I kind of reject that a little bit as well. I mean, I know that they're definitely getting better about it, and I try and support tools or support vendors that are targeting Mac and all the options out there, Linux and everything. But it's very frustrating to be told that, like, no, I'm sorry, you must conform to this entire worldview as well. And I don't like that, but that's also kind of snobby, I guess, of me. I don't know.
So what else have you learned from your tutors who you actually paid?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really critical. So I view tutoring kind of like so I play piano, and I feel like if you're going to get a tutor, I had many people. I put it out in the world. I was like, hey, I'm on Twitter. I said, I'd like to get some tutors. I want to make this a thing I'm getting better at. And a lot of people were like, hey, just give me a call. I'll tell you what's going on. I'll help you out. Mm-hmm. And that's like super sweet, but it's actually on me. Like if I don't have skin in the game, I don't think I'm going to, I don't know. It's just like when there's no value transfer, I feel like it's limited in terms of like, it's not like I'm thinking that they're dependent upon my dollars, but I think it's more of it's like this clear exchange of value, their time for my dollars. And that is a two-way street. They're going to show up because they know that I value their time. And also I'm going to work hard and go through with the assignments they give me and follow up with them because I'm paying for it. Like otherwise it's just a big waste of money. And, I just always think that's the right way to do it. It's not like libertarian, like, oh, everyone should, whatever. But, it's, I think I view it in the same way as the music world too. You wouldn't ask a piano teacher to just show you a couple things, because you need some help. It's like, no, it's like there's a very strong lesson culture there. And I was trying to structure my learning in a similar way.
You have a podcast, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Where you talk and you give away your information and insights for free to people who don't give you any skin in the game?
That's true. But when someone asks me, hey, Chris, can you actually show me how to do a layout specifically? I say, yeah, I can actually. I have tutoring as part of my online course that I do. And I also have an online course people can pay. That's like, it's a two-way street, I think,
I totally agree with that. I find that to be the same kind of psychological thing with myself. Like, I've taken online music courses before, And the transition in my mind from just fooling around to, oh my God, I have an assignment to do. And this nebulous person who runs this course, who I'm never actually going to meet, probably not even going to talk to except over email. They might grade my assignments, but it's not a conversational thing. I still feel like, okay, I have to do what they say, and I'm paying for this. There's just something that shifts in your mind when you have a formal relationship with instruction.
Yeah. Totally. Look at the numbers for MOOCs, right? So like massive online open course, like those are free and they're wonderful resources. But I think even all these years on, there's still 4% completion rates, and that's because that's about how many people would follow through all the way when there isn't any monetary. I don't know what it is. There's something psychological, and I think I've mentioned to both of you before. I'm kind of a self-help junkie, so I think there was something I read in books about this too. It's not like this is my only my personal idea, but like this is just, I feel like that's the way to move forward. Have you? I mean, Chris, you do music, but Elecia, have you ever done tutoring or similar stuff before?
Not very much. I learn out of books.
Right. Yep.
And as far as when people ask me for help, or I definitely was one of the people who said, "Yeah, Chris, call me anytime."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I did it a couple times. Yeah.
But I'm kind of the first hour is free if you want my attention. Although I shouldn't really say that because.
Uh-oh.
But
yeah, bleep that out, Chris.
I mean, if there is going to be a client relationship perspective, but yeah, I guess I don't take very many classes these days.
You did the Udacity course that I did this year.
That's the car driving one, or the
ML one.
See, I was paid in services for that because I did some work for one of their other classes. I used to take community classes all the time, and I guess I am looking at taking some makerspace stuff here. But
is this after Wendell and Lenore were on, and they were talking about their awesome classes they took?
Man, I so want to go to that. To see
right? Less of a class and more of a science vacation class. I don't know.
That was a really fun episode.
No, it's more from Robert Lang's origami episode where he said he had a laser printer or a laser cutter, and it made so much difference. And I was like, okay, I need to really do this. I need to try that. So I found a makerspace with a laser cutter. And,
Didn't you both almost get a laser? What's the desktop one that you? Yeah, didn't you get one, or you're going to?
We were signed up until the CEO said I wouldn't buy it from us, and then I canceled our order after many latenesses.
I think he was by way of apology for the
delays. It was very much
it
an apology.
It wasn't a don't buy this, but the delays were long and it was expensive, and we had other expenses that were coming up. So
3D printers.
No.
Mm-hmm.
3D printer was a fraction of what the Glowforge cost.
Yeah, but I read so many books, and I get them from the library, or I guess I do buy some of the books, but that's always how I've learned. So it's not, I totally see the tutoring relationship, and I understand why paying for a class makes more sense, but I'm not wired that way, no.
I just need some guilt motivator, and it's either either an instructor who I'm paying, or if I have a project that I'm working with somebody else, like the album I'm working on with my brother, I'm highly motivated to work on music because we're both trying to finish it. And if it was just me trying to make a record, I think that would be bad. It would probably take me 10 years. But so, having another person involved in a project, or just
we're having a goal, right? I mean,
having a goal, right?
I mean, I've got an event coming up in the summer. I need to get something done for that event. Like, that's a pretty hard deadline.
Yeah.
Nothing like a deadline to really motivate, right?
Yeah, that I do agree with. And it is really nice to be able to talk to someone when you're learning something, either an expert or a co-learner, just to unsnarl those things that only takes them 10 minutes but takes you 3 hours to work through.
Yeah. And I find another thing that, so a lot of time when you're nebulously trying to figure out, well, I want to, so I say I remember, I think either one of you two said it, or maybe someone on the embedded Slack said it. I was like, I want to get better and better. They're like, what does that even mean, Chris? That doesn't, it doesn't mean anything, which is true. But I think it's more of you need direction then too. You want to get better at writing C code, great. Maybe you want to, have a better. People then help you form that and say like, well, maybe you want to get better at memory management and understanding how memory structures work or whatever. But have a project there. Have something you're working towards, and that's another thing that the tutors really help with. So I had one tutor was a little bit less experienced, about 5-6 years of experience, but I actually really appreciated that as well, because being closer to the beginning of their journey too, if you read about like learning styles and stuff like that, one of the first things that happens is you lose the feeling of like being confused and being kind of like lost.
You've totally lost that, haven't you, Christopher?
I am confused and lost all the time. We're gonna talk a little bit in a little bit, because I'm actually engaged in a parallel effort to what you're doing, Chris. But please go on.
Yeah, and I think that like so having someone close, they talk about like beginner's mind as well, and so like that's like a nice thing that you can approach every problem with to be like, oh well, I am a beginner, and so you have this open mind around learning, and that's kind of what they're talking about. But then they also say it from the teacher's perspective of you need to have that perspective, because you don't remember the feeling of like struggle and like cluelessness. And so I'm not saying my tutor was clueless, quite the opposite, but he was closer to the beginning of the process. And so it wasn't like advanced topic. It was more like, well, let's get you blinking an LED. And he was super helpful. So.
Okay. So your project, blinky lights, radio.
Yeah. Oh, that's another problem, is that simultaneously I was like, I should really do more RF stuff too. So
you're just
yeah, real smart, Chris. Yeah.
Well, and
so I went and bought a $3,000 VNA, and and learning. I have a lot of books as well, and we could talk about books and things like that. But it's these are deep. You may have noticed that firmware is a kind of a deep field. So is RF. So
really, I've heard there's black magic there that makes it deeper.
Right.
All I know is you have to make little squiggles on your PCBs.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely that.
And if you're doing something worn, you have to deal with battery subsystems. Are you just buying that off the shelf?
That actually I'm fine with, but it's a battery. Batteries are easy for me. I mean, that's kind of my background.
Well, but I mean, there's not just the battery. There's the how do you charge it, and how do you tell people their battery's going low?
Oh, I see. Yeah, this is a disposable. It's it's like it's a replaceable like a coin cell, so that makes it real simple. But then there is voltage conversion and boosting and all that other stuff as well. But again, that's kind of my bread and butter every day. So I'm not that worried about that, But if someone was coming to me and be like, hey, I really need help with a battery system, then I'd have to like approach that with beginner's mind and be like, what is the hard part of getting started with thinking about current flow, and that's the kind of stuff I deal with contextual electronics.
Right.
How much are you still working on that?
On contextual electronics?
Yeah.
That has been pretty background for me lately. It's still going. There are still students. I still, do tutoring and helping, and but there has not been any new coursework in a long while. I've been really focusing on consulting, and yeah, that's been, it's basically me. I was looking at contextual electronics, and I didn't feel like I had a ton more to offer in terms of like my knowledge, and it's kind of like a cashing in on someone's background knowledge. And I was like, I really need to go build up my skills so I can offer a course that has some firmware in it, or when I did the first round of contextual electronics, or the second, I suppose, there was that exact same part, the STM32F030, and because it's a cheap part, but I hired 2 people to help me with firmware, and I don't want to do that anymore.
You also have a forum for consultants. Do you talk about that?
I mean, it's there. There's an application. Well, we can link it in, and but yeah. So that is actually the Contextual Electronics forum. There's like a hidden semi-private section there, and it's like invite only, and so you got to apply. But if people are interested in consulting or are consulting and want to interact on there, I started that because the 20 months ago or whatever, whenever I was deciding to go into consulting, I was just like so scared and wanted some free help, I guess, to contradict myself from before. But I just wanted to talk to people and, discuss things. And everyone I talked to was like, yeah, I really had trouble when I was learning this. And I obviously talked to both of you. You have great experience there. But, just kind of like why have people ask these questions over and over again? Why not make it kind of searchable, but still private enough that people feel comfortable discussing some amount of details, maybe not every detail.
Well, community help is a different kind of help than focused individual help. You get a lot of experiences that can contradict each other, but if you get kind of reinforcing opinions, it's like, okay, that's probably meaningful.
Yeah. And I mean, right now, so we have people that are doing firmware stuff and FPGA stuff and RF stuff. And recently there was a big layoff at Analog Devices, and so a lot of chip designers are coming in now too, and which is unfortunate. I was very sad about that, but it's interesting just hearing how, hearing a chip designer's consulting efforts is going to be so radically different from someone who's like doing firmware maybe up into the software layer, and it's all still technology. It's all still very complex work, of course, but it's just like, think about like a chip designer has to have access to like a $50,000 software license. And a firmware person might be working in completely open source, GCC and Vim and whatever else, right? And so just the scale differences there are quite stark sometimes.
Well, and the costs for firmware continue to drop.
Sure.
Right. I'm not sure that's happening on the chip design side of things.
Right. Yeah. And similar things, RF, you buy equipment, like if you want to do microwave design, my goodness. Like I found I had a talk a couple back in last August, I suppose. And I had thought I'd found this like great looking VNA, and it was like, I was like, oh wow, it's only like $3,000 or something. I don't know how my brain just like completely went sideways. And I was looking at this beautiful thing, and then like I kind of zoomed out and I'm like, oh, that says $564,000. Like that's more than a house in many cities in the United States. Like that's insane. But it's a 60 gigahertz VNA that like only very, very small amounts of people in the world need.
So back to firmware.
Mm-hmm.
What was the hardest part that was a surprise? What did you went in with, Arduino expectations and some expectations that it was going to be harder than that because you've heard other people talk about it. What was a surprise that was hard?
I feel like it came in stages, right? I think that the tool chain stuff and just like figuring out what's going on was hard to me. And I feel like one thing that I think I expressed to both of you at some point on the Slack, and I've said other places too, is I'm always second guessing myself. So it's confidence pieces, right? It's like, this must be bad code. This must be bad code. This isn't compiling. I don't know what's going on. Oh my God, you're so stupid. Why are you doing this, Chris? And then it turns out the cable was broken, or something like that, or the driver wasn't installed properly for the. So I think it's just the amount of assumptions on the way towards that first blink are so large, and because I was, arguably this is also because I was going in a non-specified route. I wasn't going like STM32 using Cube software and using everything and like following the instructions on Windows. I could have done that, and I arguably should have done that, but because I wasn't. Now I'm out in the wilderness and just trying to like Google around for answers. And that is a tough thing to do. And would I go back and tell myself to do that? I don't know. I think it was valuable. I think that hiring tutors was a result of that frustration. But I think also that kind of learning sucks sometimes. And I think that is part of the understanding of like, you're going to have some struggle. But I forget who I talked to about it, but they're like, part of the thing that you start to realize is that if I just stay calm and I keep trying new things and I keep stepping through problems, I'm going to figure this out because there's no other option. And like that. So much of it is just mindset at the beginning. And
the stay calm. The don't get frustrated. It's okay to assume it's your code, but it's also okay to give a 50% probability to it not being your code. Or 25% or whatever percent you want. But that has to increase as you continue to check your code.
Right. And actually, so I'm just now, it's just back in my head. One of the problems that I had that Elecia was very kind and helped me with.
The NRF 52.
Yeah. So I was working on NRF 52 and I was using a dev board, and I, trying like the dickens to just get this thing running. And finally, I'm expressing so much frustration. Alicia's like, why don't you just give me a call on Skype? We'll talk through it. And the end result was I was following an example for the wrong goddamn part. It just wouldn't have worked no matter how much I tried. I was just reading I actually had gotten this board from someone who was very kind who sent it to me, and it said NRF 52, and nope, it was an NRF 51. Let me tell you, or it was, I don't remember. It was the NRF. I thought it was the NRF 52 840, and this was the NRF 52 832. And every example I tried would not have worked on that.
And the thing was, I knew those examples. I had used them, so I knew
right.
how they should work, and what you were telling me were the right steps. So then you start thinking, okay, something else is wrong. But as a beginner, if the steps don't work, it could be the way you did it. It could be the steps. It could be cosmic rays. It's just hard.
There's 1,000 things like that.
That's right.
Because they're complete systems, right? It's not like a little circuit. It's not like a little program running on your desktop, that you can fully understand. It's a complete system with all these parts and memories and huge. I mean, we talk about firmware, and it's not like 1982 where firmware was 500 bytes of code that somebody wrote. And it's huge amounts of code that are running on various pieces. So it's this complete system, and lots of parts can break in a complete system through no fault of your own, even through things as ridiculous as mislabeling, right? There's always something. I guess that was my point back with learning C-flag. There's always something that can go wrong, so don't bother learning anything.
Right.
It's not really the lesson I want to give. But.
It's a system on the edge of entropy, right? I mean, that's kind of what it gets towards. Yeah. And this is the reason, right? So again, to go back to should you just follow the vendor's path? And it's like, yeah, maybe. That is the least entropic way towards getting some dopamine in your brain, And for some people, that is the right solution. I would probably say that as well. When I said I wanted to learn GDB and all these other things, people kept telling me, yeah, use the NIDE, use this and this. And it's like, there are very, very strong arguments for that. I ignore them, and I paid the price for it. But then again, I think about that too. Someone says, do this the easier way. And it's like, okay, but all those skills that you have, person telling me that do the easy way, all those skills you have came from similar frustrations. Yeah. So do you skip those frustrations in order to get something done? And it's like, well, sometimes you have to get something done, but sometimes you want the learning. So I don't really know. I don't know what to.
I wouldn't say do it the easier way anymore. I think it was. Now I would say do it the modern way.
Okay. Yeah.
There's very few cases. I mean, there's a few instances where I've been places where we've gone to raw GDB in GCC and command line with people using IDs on top of that, of their choice.
Yeah, you're doing it for revision control or continuous integration or something like that. You're building these stacks of tools for your whole company, right?
Right. But even there, it's usually to get away from a licensing fee. It's not a technology decision. It's like, oh, we're paying $5,000 a month per seat for whatever for IIR. That's a big cost center. Let's take the pain and shift to something else, and we'll support
let's spend it in hours in
we had people supporting that. We had a team of 2 or 3 people who were like the GCC folks. Right. So it wasn't that every developer was a genius at running command line tools. It was that it was a supported product within the company.
And that's intellectual property that actually adds value to the company and all these other things. But as a solo starting person, you're not going to get that. You're really going to lean on some company that may have done that for you. And
did you use HAL for your stuff at all, or just completely?
No, I did. Yeah, so the STM32 stuff, I ended up going into using the Cube configure tool, and then doing some house stuff too. Okay. And that's what Nicholas, my tutor, the less experienced but very helpful tutor, was kind of walking me through that, and it was just super calm to watch and follow along as well. There's also that, and there's actually some really great YouTubers who do that stuff. And I think there should be more of that. I'm very strong on the I talk about apprenticeship and that kind of thing, but just watching over someone's shoulder sometimes just gives you that, it's not I can immediately do it, but it's, oh, I think I can do it. Oh, I think I can struggle through it, and I can always go back to that example. And that is, I wish there was more of that.
I've heard more people are programming on Twitch, which sounds awful to me. I mean, I hate it when people watch me type. And yet, I can see how that would be valuable just to see how somebody else works.
Drive me insane.
Yeah. Well, but Chris and I worked recently together, and I use push and popd to store my directories when I'm in Linux so that I can change directories. This is very not important. I use a certain command.
Yeah.
And he saw me doing it. He was like, what's that? And then a few minutes later, he used a command. I'm like, what's that?
Yeah, exactly. It's like workflow voyeurism. Like you don't know how other people work, and you might find something. Like, how do you figure out? Like, how would you go and Google for that functionality that the push and popd thing that you do? I don't know. Like, I don't even know I don't know what you use it for. Like, but once you learn it, it's really valuable, and it could save you a lot of time.
Yeah.
Not to mention the confidence piece. Like, I feel like so much of learning is a confidence game. So again, going back to piano, right? If I want to go and like learn how to play a D minor 7 on the piano, I can follow and look it up online and find a chart. But like having a teacher sit there with you and be like, oh, sometimes the 7th goes down below the root, and then you play the root on your left hand, or just all these things that like, yeah, now I feel great about it, but I don't know, like the way I used to play was very clunky and self-taught, and having that guiding hand is like a fast forward. It's like a cheat code, and I think that's worth paying for, honestly.
You've said you've gone from Arduino, and then you went to GDB and Vim and the hard way, and then you've gone a little back. Are you back to Arduino, or do you mean the cube and sort of the center point?
No, I will. A little callback here to the Jay Carlson shows on Embedded. Also, dibs on having Jay on the show next. You guys don't get him back. I've talked to him about it. I said, if they call you, do not go back on Embedded before you go on the amp hour. So if people haven't listened to Jay's shows, I think they were both great. I enjoyed his first show, which was about the $1 microcontroller in depth, but the second one was about learning, and man, everything he said was just the Contextual Electronics parts of my brain just lit up. They were just like a Christmas tree. Everything just really fell into place. But he has the $1 microcontroller page, which is a great resource still. And let me tell you, his favorite part is the EFM8 LB1264E, whatever it is. And wouldn't you know it, I am using that part now. and it is a great little part. A lot of people give me sideways glances. They're like, 8051, huh? In 2020. Okay. But I was looking around for some parts for a part that had a lot of DACs, and this thing has 4 DACs and a whole bunch of analog inputs and other peripherals, and it's just a peripheral machine with an 8051 core. So it's great.
I think the thing about STM versus things like that is the STM has all this infrastructure behind it, and the clock tree that's, if you look at the configuration thing in Cube, it's a poster. There's a lot of complicated stuff. So if you were to try to bring up an STM without Cube and without help by yourself, that's like a year-long project for somebody.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes,
and I think it's just you're in front of a data sheet the whole time, right?
And I think the 8-bit stuff usually is a lot more friendly. Am I wrong, or are you finding it more friendly?
Parts of it, as you may both recall, I've sought some help on the embedded Slack, and there's been some quirky stuff.
Yeah, the interrupt stuff is always a challenge.
Not just interrupt stuff. So like there's paging. So there's a special function register paging. And so like I think that I'm writing to a register, and it's like, no, Chris, you're on the wrong page.
Yeah.
You gotta change the page before you write to a value. But some stuff's really simple, actually. So like the way, that you're just reading and writing from registers, sometimes it's just super intuitive. There's a macro that assigns a value or a register name to it, and it's just =1, =0 kind of stuff, and you're turning things on and off like that. And I know that that's similar. There are similar things in HALs and stuff, but it seems like there's less overhead to do some of that.
That's true. I mean, the HAL's purpose is so that you can switch chips.
Right.
It's not
it's an abstraction, and abstractions come with costs.
Yes. And you were saying earlier about, well, people didn't. Are you supposed to go the path that the person who's teaching you went, or are you supposed to go the path that they say is easier? And,
you should go your own way.
But
hey.
Copyright strike for that.
But a lot of us did do 8051s.
I didn't.
And there is a path that shows that that's okay if you really want to understand what C is doing.
Well, I guess I did 6502. So, okay.
And I have brought up a Cortex M0 when they first came out from scratch from an 800-page data sheet that hadn't been printed yet. We were pre-production of
well, I feel
Cortex
completely
M0.
inadequate now.
It was really hard, really. I mean, but you bring up the clock tree. You do it one step at a time. You map it out with your electrical engineer.
8 hours a day in an office.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a little...
with a scope.
Difference of focus.
Push into a pin.
Yeah, difference of focus. Maybe with some other people to bounce things off of. No? Was it all you?
That was...
Wow.
That was when I was consulting in that place in Union City. So they didn't have any other firmware people. See, although my EE was fantastic.
So Chris, I'm doing a similar thing to you that you're doing. I have not written a line of C for work since early 2019, I think, something like that.
Oh, okay, that's
only a year.
A year, right? Yeah,
yeah. Maybe
I haven't
a
ridden my
little
bike
longer.
in like
no,
years,
late 2018. It was late 2018.
Still only about a year.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing my current client is all machine learning, so it's all Python. And I haven't done no embedded and no C stuff. So
we'll go to C eventually. Sorry.
So I was starting to get worried that I was getting out of practice, skills were getting rusty, and I said, well, I've got some extra time. I'm not doing a tremendous amount of hours. I'll do a personal project, and I'll do it the hard way. The hard way. Now, listen to what I define as the hard way. The hard way is what I would do for a client. For most clients, if they said, okay, I want to do something in STM32, and here's the project. So I bought the dev board. I bought some peripherals and things, and I'm making what I'm making doesn't really matter, but it's a little MIDI thing that does.
And we'll probably talk about it last week.
Some synthesis, maybe some note processing, maybe some sort of thing on a TFT display. But it's got a MIDI interface and a display, and I2S audio, a bunch of peripherals. But the goal was to just bring that up from scratch and relearn, re-experience bringing up peripherals and writing code. So I had never used STMs except far down the road of development.
Oh yeah, right now at the beginning of the You're not architecting decisions. You're just dealing with what was placed in front of you.
Yeah. So I got their stuff. I'm using their IDE, which is built on top of GDB and GCC, but it's Eclipse. I thought repeatedly about leaving it, but every time I do, I'm like, it's working fine.
Didn't they buy someone too?
Yeah,
that was on your show. Yeah,
that's the IDE they've got now. And it's got the cube thing built into it. So you just hit another tab and you can go look at the whole configuration and it'll regenerate code on the fly.
I saw that and it was pretty cute.
It's pretty slick. I mean, there's a lot of problems with it. It's Eclipse, which I generally don't like very much, but it's working fine. But, I'm finding a lot of the same things you are, where it's just like, what the hell is going on? What have I done? So
right.
I got MIDI working pretty quickly because I was a UART. And, the support in the HAL for the UART's okay. But I had a lot of trouble with interrupt handling. Still do. I have notes, okay, go back and look at this because this is stupid. The way HAL deals with interrupts is just completely dumb.
Yeah, and it's really heavy-handed, right?
Yeah,
it's usually it's like, oh, well, it throws to a function, and then there's like 30 lines of code, and you're literally just turning off the interrupt flag, and why, but they're doing it for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, it sort of works, but I got into this situation where if I send it enough data, eventually it doesn't reset the interrupt flag, and so I had to add code to go and hammer that if that was unclear.
At least you're just sitting in the background giggling. This is fun. Yeah.
But the next thing I tried to bring up was the display. And that took me 2 weeks. It was a SPI display. And I got one from Adafruit because it was like, okay, this has an Arduino library. I can look at that for reference, well documented. And I got into it and I was like,
the interface is usually well documented.
Yeah.
But the parts they buy are usually, some obscure Chinese brand, and it's
actually an ST LCD controller.
Oh, okay, all right.
But it has like a 400-page data sheet. So if you try to bring that up from scratch, that's another many month process if you're doing that. So I kind of backed off on that and went and looked at what the Adafruit was doing and copied some of that code. It had like 400 instructions, 400 commands that need to be sent over SPI. Anyway, long story short, that took me a huge amount of time to get working. And I had my Salier out doing SPI. I'm like, God, I hate embedded as I'm doing this. So it's all this stuff is a challenge, and it's still a challenge for people who've been doing this a while. The funny thing was the last peripheral I brought up was the audio interface, and that was right after getting the display working. I was like, well, this is going to take me forever. Yeah. And so I wrote like 10 lines of code that I thought might make it work, plugged it all in, went out and soldered a header on, hooked it up.
Plugged his headphones
Plugged my headphones into the thing, put it on my head, and I'd read the note in the Adafruit thing for their little codec thing. It said, well, this audio amplifier is really low level, so it's not going to be able to drive headphones very loudly. Boy. And I'm like, oh, this is going to work anyway. So I pressed go, and it was the loudest noise, loudest saw wave coming out. I had to throw my headphones off. But that came up in, half an hour. So you never know what's going to happen with that stuff. Mm-hmm. But I'm finding lots of frustrations, and I'm working through it because I'm like, okay, this is always frustrating. I remember it being frustrating 4 years ago when I was bringing up a display at Fitbit. Similarly, why isn't this? Yep. And I think a lot of it's because with things like that, nothing works, right? Until it does. Yeah. And you don't know why it doesn't work because you have no visibility. You can't look inside the display controller chip and say, "Oh, well, I was expecting you to be in this mode with the chip select high and the command bit was set to this, but then you sent me this and I got confused." Well, you don't know; it just doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
I would like to note that I'm not allowed to help on this unless asked.
Oh, wow. Okay, how's that going?
It's making me crazy.
Yeah, right.
Well, because it's like
listening to someone who they're having a fever dream and they're like, no, get the bees away from me.
I've asked you for help, and I've talked to you about it. You said you've given me good advice, and but at other times it's been I don't know either, right? So.
Well, there was of course it's only sending 4 bits. You must have only sent 4 bits.
That was pretty dumb.
In cube, that was
pretty dumb. I was just my eyes were just skipping over the part where I had SPI set to 4 bits, but.
Well, I think that's. I think that kind of rolls back to so what is the value of IDE and all these other things? I think what some of the vendors are doing more, and definitely true for Silicon Labs with EFM8, and I think the STM32 tool is doing better with this now too. And there's a lot of other tools that have similar things. But one of the disservices I find with the Arduino IDE and similar things is it's simple, but then you never get outside the simple.
Yeah.
And when you start to have breakpoints and you start to have register inspection, all these other things, no one's there to tell you how much that will help you, and when you're not just spitting out double debug to a serial port. That is such a big shift, and no one listening, very few listening are going to be surprised by this, but I feel like people who are at university level, who are going to be working in the Arduino IDE and similar kind of reduced interfaces. You need the leveling up to the breaks and the debugs and everything like that. That gives you the chance to go and see, hey, I thought I set that CRC register, and then I figured out that no, I wasn't doing it. I had the wrong page selected, and I can actually go and look at the register after I step past that line of code, and it's not there. And again, not surprising for many people listening, but again, how do you know that if you don't Google for that? It's what is the best way to do firmware? No one's going to tell you that basic thing, right?
Yeah, it's not a discipline. Firmware is not a discipline. It's a collection of lore over 30 or 40 years. It's not like computer science. It's a collection of all kinds of different things, and most of it's things that have been developed by these hardware companies, right? It's nobody's mathematically backed. This is the best way to do serial communication. It's okay. Here's our peripheral, and here's the 50 registers that configure it, and here's the exceptions to the rule, and it's all. I talked
to someone from a very, very, very large web scale company who's doing some hardware, and boy, are there software people perplexed by hardware. And it's not just because it's it's hard and there's electrons involved and all these, but just the methods. They're like, what are you doing here? Do you know what we can do with code?
Yes.
It is so far afield, and some people have tried to fix it, and these are great efforts. the chip companies are. I feel like more software people coming into more software background type people coming into the hardware space and getting hired at like an ST or similar things. That is probably one of the best things that will happen for the industry, because there will be more methods and similar, just how they develop these dev kits and similar things. That is just really, really helpful.
Yeah, the tools have been getting better. They need to get better faster. I do worry sometimes about the software approach to writing software on small devices, because
memory.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a tension between resources and cost and things. And if you can afford it and it makes sense, then that's fine. But I always get worried when people are like, well, you should do it this way. Well, I really can't, because then your application doesn't fit,
Right.
And that's a hard discussion to have sometimes, because it's like, well, I can run, I'm running Python over here and it does all this stuff, and I can just put that on my microcontroller. You can, but then you can do, an eighth of what you could do otherwise. And probably in 8 times the time.
Yeah, so there's that new Arduino that just was announced at CES. It's $99. It's got a Cortex M7 and a Cortex M4 on it, and it's H7. Yeah,
it's a Raspberry Pi. Okay, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. And but I think that it's slightly a disservice, because it's like part of me says, hey, look, computing is cheaper than ever. You should throw resources at the problem, but at the level they're talking about, I'm not sure where the balance point is. We'll find out, right? But
yeah, I don't know who that's for, I guess.
I think that's for JavaScript developers who want to do JavaScript near the hardware. I think that's honestly going to be.
Yeah. But it's expensive compared to, a Raspberry Pi is the same thing, right?
That's not a problem for software people.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, not for me to get.
One thing that I wanted to bring up as well about all this too is that I used to open code, someone would send me some example code or some other things, and my first response was fear. Like, it would literally, I'd be like, open up and be like, what am I looking at right now? Like when you look at someone else's code, I'm not sure if there's
yes, there is Gerbers. Gerber. I do fine with schematics, but if you send me a Gerber and you don't send me the schematics, I am toast. I'm just like, I can't.
Right. This is madness. Why would you do any of this stuff, right?
Yes.
And I feel like it's getting better for me, and I think that's a sign in the right direction. Elecia, you have that resource on GitHub. I forget what it's called now, but it's like reusable code or something like that.
Yeah, reusable code.
I owe you some pull requests, by the way.
Yeah, and I need to actually do the pull requests.
I haven't done them. Well, you have the other ones hanging out.
But that's like good. That's like good example code, and that scared me. And then Alvaro sent some code as well, and that scared me. But,
well, the funny thing was that Alvaro's code and my code do the same thing in mostly the same way, but they look different enough that it would be a little like, wow, that's a lot of code to read.
Yeah, right. And it's like, it's meant to be reusable, right? And that's good code. That's a good library style approach to things. And yet, when you start passing around void pointers and I don't know, like string passing, anything with strings
function pointers. Once you have function pointers,
yeah, most
people will go cross-eyed.
Yeah, I'm still not quite there yet, but
you'll know you've made it, Chris, when the reaction to code that's not yours, that is given to you or to look at or that you find, is not fear but anger. Then you will have ascended.
I'll be stroking my gray beard. Yes.
How dare they?
Right. Whippersnappers. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that again, that's a lot of mindset stuff, and I'm not sure if that's like immediately helpful for people, but I think that the interesting thing about it, I'm not sure there's a way out of it. Like the only way out is to do it. You can't.
No, it really isn't.
You can't read your way. I mean, like books are very helpful for me as well, but just reading it's not going to help you. You have to put in time in front of a debugger and just step through stuff, and
you have to make the mistakes.
Yeah, right.
Enough to know what things, to kind of have a sense of, every time something's wrong, to have a sense of a handful of things that it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you eliminate those things, then
mistakes.
You start getting worried. And
yeah. So another thing that's been really, really helpful that Elecia talks about, I think, Chris, you have too, but I have been journaling a lot, And like as I go through, because I would get into these kind of fury states where I would, I'd be trying something, have a program that's working, I change something, nothing changes. I change something, nothing changes. Change something, nothing changes. Change something, nothing changes.
You didn't plug it in.
And it was plugged in. It was, yeah, that has happened too. But I change something and then it breaks, and then I say, okay, I can go back and undo that thing. And then I go back and undo that thing, and then something else is broken. And it's just like, I've gotten myself so deep into a hole. And yes, I am using revision control. But the real thing is that I'm not thinking like experiments. And that's really one of the most valuable things that I've been doing for myself is I'll write myself a journal, just a bulleted list on a day-by-day basis. I call it a build log. Like, what am I doing? What am I stepping through? What am I trying? If I'm running an experiment, I'll indent the bullet list. Hey, I'm going to go try and change the clock. I'm going to go and increase the clock speed and see if I break anything. And this happened, this happened, this happened. Looks like everything's okay. But now I have a record, a chronological record as well of what I've been breaking. And that's been really helpful.
That's fantastic for two reasons. The first is when I've taught people computer-related things, one of the chief fears I've found with people who have a lot less experience than any of us, but who are just starting out is kind of, I'm going to break something, right? Like,
yeah, there's like high cost of breaking something,
right? I'm really going to break something. Like, I don't want to, and getting over that and having permission to just make changes experimentally and see what happens without fear of breaking anything. That's super important. Yep. And the other is it's just a debugging technique, right? When you got these black boxes, like a spy peripheral that isn't talking to you, at a certain point when you run out of those 5 or 6 things that it usually is, you have no choice but to start changing the inputs and just see if something changes or if you've got something wrong in a configuration that maybe isn't documented correctly. Because half the time, okay, not half the time, but a fair number of the time, the data sheets are wrong. And it may be that a flipped bit in a data sheet is what the problem is. And you're not going to find that without just exhaustively going through and saying, okay, well, let's change all the inputs and see if the outputs change at all.
Yep.
The third reason to do it is rubber duck debugging, which is your notebook actually becomes something you're talking to, sort of.
Exactly.
I mean, not... But
I have like this tone where I talk like it is. I find myself writing myself notes to like future me,
Yeah. Or even just laying out the problem as you would if you were laying it out to a tutor or to a mentor or to a coworker. And that helps me so much because now I've organized my thoughts. It's not just having run all of the experiments. It's that feeling of, I don't know what else to do. And then you write out what you did and what you think. And suddenly you get a bunch more ideas on what you should do because it's just, you put it all together in a different perspective.
Yep. And listing your assumptions. And I feel like that's usually when I get to the end of the 5 or 6 things, like Chris mentioned, that I think it could be, it's because the 7th and through 15th thing that I should try is because my assumptions are completely off, it wasn't plugged in, or I'm writing to the wrong register, or something like that. I don't understand what a register does.
Or you've spent the whole day downloading the old code image, and you never actually updated it. Something that's, of course, never happened to me.
Too real.
I heard that there was a new KiCat happening.
New KiCon. Yes.
KiCon, sorry.
Or it is going to be in Europe, so I'm okay calling it KiCon because, the French. That is going to be happening September 11th to the 13th at CERN.
Oh, wow.
Are you going?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because this is your conference. You did this one pretty much by yourself last year.
I did the first one. No, I had a lot of help, but I organized. I was the organizer of the first one, and then I was talking to the development team and Seth, who's on the development team, who started the KiCad Services Corporation, I think it's called, which is like a professional, kind of like a mini Red Hat for KiCad. And Seth's like, I want to do a conference this year. I want to get people together. And we started talking about, well, maybe we should have it at CERN. We had talked about that last year, dreamed about it last year, and it all fell into place. There's been like super, like the folks at CERN are so helpful, and they're really well prepared to do conferences too. So,
that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'll be both a lot easier for you and a lot more fun for you, and probably really educational.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I might get to go. I don't know what the extent of the exploring we get to do at CERN, but like, I mean, that's like a dream to go see the Hadron Collider, Large Hadron Collider, and probably bump a switch and
reverse the universe,
reverse polarity on every electron in the world. Yeah. That's the hope. It's really a dream. It's a dream.
That's your dream. That's good.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Chris, you were doing a little bit of KiCad, I remember.
Yeah.
Elecia, have you tried it yet? You tried it at one point.
Yeah, I did your Blinky, and it was funny. It was really good, and KiCad wasn't that hard. But it turns out, despite my incredible ability to play games that look like layout, apparently I'm really bad at layout.
Well, at the beginning, yeah.
But I mean, I play these games and I totally can untangle things, but not with parts.
No, layout is tangling things intentionally. with intention.
Making the knot smaller. That's right.
So I didn't get too far with that. And I kind of realized, as much as I like hardware, I prefer to buy it fully formed and then to do software on top of it or to apply it to things. So for a long time, I wanted to learn how to do boards, and it's not that I wouldn't mind that knowledge. It's just I'm not going to invest in it.
Right. And I think at the point where you can't get a sensor that you really want to attach to a Teensy or whatever the platform of choice might be, that's when, unfortunately, that's the right time to learn. Or the right time to learn was about 3 months prior to that, but that's when you're really going to be motivated to do it because no one else is going to do it for you. I think these days there are so many people that are doing hardware, Tindy, similar things.
I was thinking, Tindy, and we have had at least one listener offer and actually do a board, which I used recently. So it may be a skill set I opt not to go towards because I'm more interested in machine learning.
Yeah, I think it's all choice, right? I mean, we all have so much time on this earth. I can't learn clarinet in addition to piano, in addition to, firmware and RF and everything. It's just, how deep do you want to get into each thing? And if you want to get deep into machine learning, there's going to be less time to skim the surface on a hardware kind of thing. So,
well, and then there's origami, which is a whole.
Of course. Well, folded paper has no
I'm surprised
limits.
you aren't doing some now.
I'm not allowed to fold paper near microphones. I heard that.
It is pretty loud, I gotta say. Have you announced on here that we do a book club?
No. Maybe we mentioned it.
Yeah. I stepped away for this most recent book because I have some other stuff going on. But
Why didn't
we did a book on
anybody tell
learning
me?
that both of you hated, about practice rather.
I liked things about it. I liked the messages. I think it could have been delivered
I liked the
differently.
messages. I didn't like the author.
You didn't like the writing, yeah. I get it. I listened to it, and it was very. I listened to it while I walked the dog, and that's much less invested kind of thing. Yeah.
And then we did one about writing that we all kind of mostly liked.
Yeah, mostly about writing.
Mostly about writing.
Also about bears.
Yeah.
It was draft number 4. The first one was the practicing mind. The second one was draft number 4.
And then you ditched us for drift into failure, which you would have liked because it's
just wrinkling my brain.
It is, yes, it is wrinkling the brain.
Maybe I'll do a catch up and we'll see if I can sneak in.
But it also had a chapter which had a very detailed reconstruction of an airline disaster, which ruined my Sunday last week.
Oh, this is a good advertisement, Chris.
Well, I have personal problems with airplanes. But,
right, yeah, okay.
But it's very good, but it's a dense read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of books too, so another thing that happens to me with firmware. So now I feel like I'm feeling more confident, and there's been a lot of great people helping me. My tutors were wonderful. I've actually stopped doing tutoring for now because I got so busy with the consulting stuff. But this thing keeps happening now where I'm kind of like moving up in the layers. I'm like, well, I really need to, work on state machines. And I go into the embedded forum or embedded Slack rather. And I'm like, here's what I'm working on. Here's what I'm thinking about I should do. And then like about 15 minutes later of people being very helpful and chatting, they're like, did you read that chapter in Alicia's book? I'm like, I did. I should read it again. And then that happened about 3 or 4 times. And so I'm also rereading Alicia's book.
I am too. If it
so
makes you feel any
book,
better,
Alicia.
And I copy edited it, so
yeah,
I have it on my desk right there.
People should go reread that. And it's the thing, like you mentioned, like reading books to learn. That first pass, that is an important thing. But it's also like, how deep are you going on things, and how much, I always talk about context, how much context you have for the thing that you're reading. It's so easy for me to nod my head and be like, oh, yeah, state machines. I get state machines. But when I'm like elbows deep into a state machine and being like, why isn't this working? Why am I doing any of this? It's a lot different, right? And then a guiding hand would be really helpful. And that's kind of like a book chapter acting like a very specified tutor. I could also hire a tutor to do that same kind of thing. But a book is kind of put together to just be all these things at once.
I find with books, like if you have experience with the things that they're talked about in books, but maybe you're just a little bit away from it, going back and reading those chapters while you're working with it, it's a lot easier, and it's a different kind of value. It's like, okay, I remember now, that kind of feeling. Oh, here are the pieces I was forgetting, which is really, really valuable to go back instead of sitting there trying to remember or rederive, a way to do state machines that you kind of remember, but not quite. It's so nice to go back to a chapter that you may have already read. Maybe you fully understood it at the time, but now you don't. It's like, oh, okay, and refresh your memory.
Just look at the pictures.
I find well, sometimes that's all you need.
Yep.
Yeah, and with the machine learning books, a lot of them have Jupyter Pythons.
Oh, those are.
And I love going back and forth between running and reading their code and reading what they wrote about their code in their book and then modifying their code. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess when I say I read things, I do more than that. But and actually, I did email someone this week with a very long, detailed question, and I'm hoping he gets back to me. And since I know it's his job, I did put in the email, if this is too close to your job, feel free to tell me to go away. So, yeah, okay.
I mean, the example I was going to use from your book was I needed a circular buffer, which in my mind, I've done a million times.
Haven't we all?
And I'm like, okay, I got to do a circular buffer for this MIDI thing because it's going to add an interrupt and blah, 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 blah. And I think I flippantly told you to use one on the Slack, Chris, at some point.
You did, yeah.
Hey, just go use a circular buffer, dude. I mean, it's no big deal.
Right.
And so I open her chapter and they're like, well, I'll refresh my memory. I'm like, oh no. I don't remember this at all.
It has a double pointer circular buffer, which is a lot more complicated.
Right, but you did this trick with you do a little trick with
powers of two.
Powers of two, and there's all these corner cases with circular buffers where you get in real trouble. I'm like, oh, I don't remember any of these things. So it was really great to go back to that because it was both wow, I'm full of crap, and also, okay, now I remember. These are ringing bells that, okay, this isn't as easy as I remembered it. And so I apologize to sending you down that road with just hey, man, it's a circular buffer. Well, how hard could it be?
It's good to know. But I feel like that's a great example, too, where it's like, okay, I need to do this thing. Talk about a thing for machine learning to do is like, if I could just like talk out my problem and then a computer's like, I know what this probably is, because like right now my machine is the Slack and, people kindly listening to my being like, oh, I need to do this and this and this, and they suggest things. There's nothing out there like that. How do you know where to go? How do you know what to Google for sometimes?
Stack Overflow is where I end up most of the time.
Yeah, but that's not always
and
great either.
It's always sort of close to what I need, but not quite. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's imperative on all of us to have a knowledge base and keep building our knowledge base, and like truly a base, right, where we have a little bit of dip a toe into each little puddle and, not figure out how deep it goes, but like know that it's there and the name of a thing. That is really helpful, but sometimes you don't have that. Circular buffers is one for me.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to say. And then if you're in some languages, it's really easy to implement. But then when you go into C and you realize, oh, what about the first one and the last one? Oh, that one. Yeah, off by one.
The last thing I mentioned this on the Amp Hour, I think last week when this show airs, or 2 weeks ago. But we're pre-recording. We got you guys. There's another self-helpy book that I listened to was about like learning quickly, and they'd brought up a thing I'd never heard of before. And again, another thing I never would have heard of if it wasn't for this book. But it's called SQ3R. Have you heard of that?
I think I think I've heard that acronym somewhere. But what is it?
It is a reading comprehension thing, and basically it's a way to teach yourself. And so basically, it's survey question. Scrolling down the Wikipedia page, read, retrieve, review. But basically, it's you go through. The main thing is you go through the tables of contents, and you create all these questions based on that at the beginning. So if the tables of contents said chapter heading is PCB layout, the first question you write, what is PCB layout? That should be the answer you should be able to answer by the end of that. And then chapter heading 1A is creating tracks on a PCB. And so the question would be, how do I create tracks on a PCB? You know, and again, you're just creating these questions that sound really pedantic, but like at the same time, that is what the outline of this thing is supposed to be teaching you. And so if you can't do it by the end, what would someone actually be reviewing you on if it was a formalized setting? And so you're basically formalizing a setting for yourself. And then the idea is that you actively go and read based on these questions, and then you maybe make flashcards, and then you review them so that you can have recall. You know, how do you really generate recall instead of I know what a circular buffer is? It's like, well, you could go and do it, or you could go and if you're reading Alicia's chapter on circular buffer, you could there's a subheading on the off by one problem. And then you could go and review what is the off by one problem. Do you have that kind of in your long-term memory storage personally?
Yeah.
And so
that's
kind of the idea. It's very tough. I'm trying to do this with the Art of Electronics X chapters right now, and it's very the headings aren't very good on there, and there's a ton of really in-depth information that I would miss if I just did the headers. So it's not a great book for that, but there are some other books that I've been looking at, and yeah, the RF books are insane. So so much to learn, you know?
I mean, that's a form of active reading.
Yes, exactly.
And I mean, taking notes alone is a form of active reading that's pretty good for most people.
Yes, I agree.
And the questions give you another perspective. So that makes sense.
I was not a particularly good student. I think, Alicia, you were a very good student.
Such a nerd.
Chris, you sounded like you were
I became a good student.
Yeah, that's what I've gotten from the.
I did not start that way. Yeah.
Right, and I, many years into my non-schooling world, I think that this is, if you're going to learn it on your own, I think that if you're not doing it, you got to have some kind of active reading like this, and so that's what I'm trying, and we'll see.
Cool.
Well, watching you go through all this has definitely inspired me a bit too to over the last few months to do some more learning and things. So
great.
Thank you for opening the process.
Yeah, thanks for all the help.
Such as it is.
I'm not going to stop being on the Slack, just so you know.
No,
that was
a lot more. There's a lot more questions coming.
Yeah.
A lot.
And now, Chris, I think you've got everything. You're fine.
Click, deleted.
It's nice to talk about learning things because we do get frustrated, and it's really nice to hear that other people get frustrated too, because you can be in that rage hole of it should just work.
Well,
and then realize, oh wait, I heard that recently, and sometimes it's not what I think it is.
We're
it's
all
just nice
on whatever social media and seeing these. Oh, look what I did! This amazing thing. It's like, oh, great!
So many
Red
amazing
Devil,
things.
let me tell you, that guy. People who listen to the Amp Hour will know he's been on the show recently, and him too. Like I love having him on the show. He talks about his learning process. He was on the first episode of the Amp Hour for 2020, and I had him on, and he posts these amazing projects. But you know what? He came on and he was talking about what he struggles with too. And we're all there. We're all struggling with different things, and I think it's okay. I think it's giving yourself permission to learn and struggle and feel dumb sometimes. Like it's okay. And speaking of dumb, I think after this,
I'm so worried about what's going to happen next.
After I'm having Ben Krasno back on the Amp Hour.
Oh, cool.
And so, one of my shining beacons of like people who are like driven. Whenever I think about like, oh, I need to make my process more of experimental and like formalized. If people watch Ben's video about making, he did like laser cut traces on PCBs. And he holds up a thing. He's like, oh, on the 88th try, this worked.
Yeah. Yep.
Holy crap. That is amazing. So I'm going to be I probably will have already, by the time this airs, asked him about his process and similar things. Because I think that like people that are learning for a living, and I think Ben's a good example among many, that is, you need that kind of that fortitude and that rigor, and Ben struggles too. He talks about it all the time. So he's a great example of that. So I'm excited.
If everything was easy, I don't think we'd enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We would have nothing to complain about.
It'd be like The Good Place, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That last episode destroyed me.
All right. Well, I think there's only one thing left to do. You forgot to ask me lightning round questions. No?
Beach or mountains?
I'm more of a prairie person myself.
What's your favorite fictional robot?
Oh, I just finished the Bobiverse. So good. All of the Bobs.
Acoustic or electric guitar?
Electric piano.
What is your least favorite chord progression?
7-7-7-2.
I can hear that in my head right now. It's very disturbing.
It's bad, yeah.
What is your favorite flux?
The one in front of me.
If you could change...
You actually had these prepared too. I didn't know if they would have.
No, we're making them up.
Oh, that's actually you've really narrowed it down. Yeah.
If you could change one thing about the C programming language, what would it be?
Oh, we didn't even bring that up. Okay. Real quick.
And now the rest of the episode.
No, yeah. So I'm using the EFM8 and I was having this problem. I was in a for loop and I was like, from my Arduino, C++, all these other days, I had this error and it kept erroring out. And it was, for parentheses, int I equals 0, semicolon, I less than, constant, semicolon, I plus plus, end parentheses, and then the for loop, right? And it kept erroring out. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I talked to the Slack. And then we figured out that, what is the year? It's not using C99. It's using C90. 90?
Yeah.
C90. Oh, my goodness. So.
Yeah, you can't do that little int in there.
Yeah,
you
that's
have to
right.
declare it outside the loop.
If you're using a compiler that's literally 30 years old, you're going to have some paradigm changes, I guess. So I guess I changed that.
All right.
Don't use C90.
They did change
it. A lot of people have changed it. Thanks for having me back on.
This is fun. It's great to hear about your experiences with firmware because I think they map well to a lot of people's experiences too.
Yeah. Yep.
It was good to talk to you, Chris.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Bye.
Embedded is an independently produced radio show that focuses on the many aspects of engineering. It is a production of Logical Elegance, an embedded software consulting company in California. If there are advertisements in the show, we did not put them there and do not receive money from them. At this time, our sponsors are Logical Elegance and listeners like you.